Jesus prays, "The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one. I and them and you and me, so that they can be completely one. So the world, when they see them, will see me and will see your love." Of all the passages in the Bible, this is the one that breaks my heart the most. This is Jesus' last prayer. It is his prayer for his disciples and his prayer for us. And he prays this prayer right before entering the Garden of Gethsemane, right before he is arrested and tried and crucified. These are his last words to God and his last words to the disciples. And he is praying to God fervently that this ragtag group of people will be one. And that they will be so close to God, so filled with God's love, that they will be completely one, so that it will be obvious to the world that this is amazing, and Jesus' words were true, and this community is this shining beacon of love and communion, so that God's love is tangibly real because they are one. And I don't know when Jesus was praying that, if he could see like the dumpster fire that the church would be throughout history, like the just train wreck of not oneness that we would be, the division and fighting that would happen almost from the day the church began through now. I don't know if he could see that or if he just knew the human heart. And he knew how hard it would be and what a long journey it would be for us to become the dream of God, where we are one. It's this prayer that breaks my heart the most. I could just imagine Jesus in his heart of hearts seeing the potential of who we could be as humans, and Jesus about to give his life to show us this way, show us the path of love to become that new humanity. But also knowing how long it was going to take and how hard it was going to be for us to live into that dream that God has for us. And I know personally, in my 28 years as being a priest, I know personally sort of how fighty, how divisive the church can be as we battle almost from the moment I became ordained in 91 until a few years ago as we fought about marriage equality. So I saw that in my entire ministry, this sort of fighting within the church, and that, as I reflected on the 17th chapter of John, broke my heart. And now, seeing the level of rancor and division, not just in the church, but in our culture, and the way that things are just being torn apart, I can see us moving further and further away from the dream of God, this vision that we are one human family. I have moments, and this is something for me because my rose-colored glasses are pretty thick, but I have moments of despair for us and where we're headed. And when I heard this passage in John 17 and this call for us to be one, the lens that I normally looked at how we weren't doing that was usually that lens, the lens of how we couldn't agree about doctrine or we couldn't agree about politics. And I thought, like, the way forward was for us to get people on different sides of the fence to sit down and try and at least find some common ground and some way to work it out and become one. But lately, this past week, I've been looking at this passage through a different lens, and I think a more foundational, more basic lens. A different place to start. So 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to lead a retreat. It was my first time leading this kind of retreat, and it was with yoga people. It was on daily spiritual practice, cultivating daily spiritual practice with yoga people. And as I'm sort of moving into my retirement vocation and trying to figure out what I want to do with my ministry and my gifts, I wanted to try my hand at this particular thing, and I knew I needed to do it while I was in California before I moved to Kentucky, because in California I have people. I have yoga people. I have yoga friends. This is the world I live in. And so I called a Tibetan Buddhist friend of mine, and I called a yoga friend of mine, and I said, hey, I'd like to try doing this before I leave. So we partnered and we led this retreat in the Bay Area. It was great. It was a good sort of first effort for me in this world. One of the students at this retreat is a mom who lives in a very affluent suburb in the Bay Area. And she is a woman who had been doing yoga on her own in her home, like, on YouTube or whatever, doing yoga on her own. And then she decided to go to a studio after 20 years. And she went to a yoga studio. And then shortly after that, she decided to get trained as a yoga teacher. And then shortly after that, she started doing yoga in her garage for the other moms in the neighborhood. And she was talking to me about that experience. And what struck her about teaching yoga in this affluent neighborhood with the other moms was how much the other moms wept. How much they wept. They would come and do yoga and they would cry. And when she had a chance one-on-one with these people, she would put her hands on their shoulders and look them in the eyes and ask, are you happy? And she said they would just sob. And I thought about the power of that particular question. Like, she didn't say, how are you doing? Because we're trained. If someone says, how are you doing? The answer is, fine. I'm fine. Are you happy? No. I'm not. There's something wrong. There's something broken. And it just opened this opportunity because another human was looking you in the eyes and communicating, I really care. I really want to know, are you happy? Or are you broken? Or lonely? Or sad? Or despairing? Or yearning for community? Yearning for something? And I was talking with this woman, and we were brainstorming, because she was saying, this is my experience. I'm running into all of these people, and I think it's not just my neighborhood. I think maybe it's bigger than that. And what's the antidote? What do we do? And we were trying to think about that, and I remembered in my previous congregation, we created this rule of life, this here are 3 things to do if you want to be spiritually healthy. And the first one was have a daily spiritual practice, which is what the retreat was about. And to have it like every day have some way to connect to God, to connect to your true self. Like, do that every day. And as we talked about that, I realized that there are so many resources. We are not missing resources on how to do daily spiritual practice. I'm inundated with ideas on mindfulness or this or that, right? It's like you just go anywhere and someone is trying to tell you to do yoga or meditate or do mindfulness or whatever. So there's no lack of that. The third thing in this rule of life was get involved, strive for justice, get involved in the brokenness of the world. And there's no lack of opportunities to try and get involved, but it was the middle piece of the rule of life that we realized was the piece that was sorely, profoundly lacking, and that's the practice community. Be a part of a community of people where you care for each other authentically, you have each other's backs, and as we were looking at this experience of this woman in her garage with all of these sobbing mothers, there is this profound lack of connection. Like, no one else was putting their arms on their shoulders and saying, looking them in the eyes and saying, "Are you happy?" Nobody else in their world was doing that. And there's this profound lack of places where people connect in our culture right now. And none of the moms, the woman I was talking with was a devout Roman Catholic, and she went to church, and she was part of a church community, but none of the moms in her world were, and that just wasn't part of their world. And that's not something, like it used to be kind of a given that you could connect in church, but people coming up now, that's not a given, that's not on the menu of options for them, and where else can they go? And then on top of that, there's this promise of social media. I have 2,422 friends, by the way. How can I be lonely? But social media is like McDonald's for nutrition, right? It has the facade of connecting you with other people. But if you're sad, if you do something other than posting cat videos or pictures of your vacation with you smiling, if you actually express sadness on social media, the best you can hope for is a hug emoji. And a hug emoji is not going to raise me from the dead. And that, I think, is the baser place to start. If we want to look at doing something about Jesus' prayer that we all may be one, it may be the wrong place to start up here about our political divisions and try and bridge divides. Maybe the place to start is down here with, are you happy? How do we create a community? And this perspective is a helpful diagnosis for us to look at the world in which our church exists. We exist in a world where people are starving for community and communion and a way to connect with other humans that is deeper than a hug emoji. And if anybody can do that, we can do that. That's what this prayer is about. We are designed to do that. We are designed to be a community where we connect with people authentically and deeply. I think that's it. We have two tasks. One is to connect to God, to pray, to open ourselves to the divine, and to connect to one another. And to be that kind of place, that we're connecting to God and we're connecting to one another so deeply that we're this shining light that people go, whoa. And as I look, as the interim here, part of my lens that I look at in terms of interpreting Scripture is, what does this have to do with the church of St. Ambrose, the community of St. Ambrose? And this passage helps us understand the world we're in, but also helps us understand what our task needs to be as a congregation. Our task of connecting deeply with one another. And the question isn't how do we get more people to come to St. Ambrose, it's how do we create a community where we're so deeply connected to one another that when someone walks in their heart is cracked open. Like the community is saying to people, we are saying to people, are you happy? Are you okay? And if you're not okay, how can we be in communion with you? How can we partner with you? And when I look at St. Ambrose as a semi-outsider, when I look at St. Ambrose in terms of how we're doing at being a communion of people caring for one another, I would say it's a mixed bag. There are some things that are amazing. One is you, of course, are amazing. Each of you are amazing. Another thing that's amazing is the coffee hour that you have after this service. The fact that there's a full meal after the 10 o'clock service and people linger for an hour after church is amazing. The other thing that's amazing is that there are many of you who've known each other and cared for each other for decades. So your roots grow deep. The challenge is, there are many of you who've known each other and cared for each other for decades. So the questions that you maybe have asked one another like decades ago and now you assume, you're not asking each other, and you're not asking new people that are coming in. And it's kind of hard to break in to a church when everyone already knows everyone so well. And I wonder, what are the systems that are in place to help people move beyond the conversations we have at coffee hour? There's a men's breakfast that meets once a month. There is a lunch bunch of women that meets once a month. There is a great small group that meets on Wednesday nights. But how are we inviting new people into those? And what are the conversations that we're having in those? And how do we do that? And what I see is a church with a profound potential that can be hard for new people to break into. We're very friendly. Coffee hour is good. But how do we move beyond coffee hour to, are you happy? And how can we live more deeply in communion with one another? One of the things I'm learning to love about this job as interim is I just get to create homework for the new rector. And now that we're just a couple months away from a new rector coming, one of the seeds I want to plant is for you to be thinking about this, and when the new rector comes, to ask the rector, not how can you fix this, but how can we partner together? Because we realize we want to be a place that has deeper, more deep conversations and more welcoming, because we know people out there are hungry for community. And you're in this place where you have new people moving into retirement communities, you have new college kids moving in, you have this inflow of new people in the community that are hungry for connection. How do we become a place that sates that hunger? And how, new rector, can you work with us as we try to be more like the body of Christ in the world? There's nothing a new priest would want more than to have a congregation ask that question. It's a different question than how do you get new members to come to church, right? How do we become more like the body of Christ? How do we become more loving, more opening? What are the systems we need to put in place? What are the sort of ways, the groups that we want to have so that we have? What are the questions we want to ask one another? Are you happy? That's a good question. And what can we do? What can we do to bring you more alive? What can we do as a church? How do we draw closer to Jesus so that we become more alive and more filled with love and more filled with the Spirit? See, this prayer of Jesus wasn't designed to break our hearts, although that's a good start. This prayer of Jesus was designed to call us into, to open our eyes to see that there is something even more spectacular that we can participate in, which is a community of love where we are one. And the place to start is here at St. Ambrose. And we have everything we need here at St. Ambrose to do that, to get that right. And that's the first step if we want to do anything to move toward fixing the brokenness in the world. It's for you, for us, right here.